Hello, I'm Francesca Maxime. Thanks so much for joining us here in New York City. You're watching Arise News Weekend, where you'll get deeper insight into stories making headlines all around the world. In this half hour, ISIL releases another video, this time the murder of 21 Egyptian hostages. Plus, in Denmark, new details about the suspect in a series of deadly terror attacks. And Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week is underway in New York City. We have all those stories and much more straight ahead. Thanks so much for joining us. A developing story at this time. Reuters reporting that ISIL has released yet another video showing a mass execution. This time, 21 Egyptian Coptic Christians killed by ISIL militants in Libya. The 21 were kidnapped last week and then beheaded by the group. The video was shared on websites which support the terror group. Family members of those kidnapped said they called on the Egyptian government to intervene, but they did nothing. 11 more airstrikes by the U.S.-led coalition this week against ISIL militants. The military saying that positions were targeted in both Syria and Iraq, wiping out buildings and tactical and transit units. Iraqi fighters are desperately trying to hold ground against ISIL in the Anbar province. Reports say that ISIL is gaining ground, though. It's feared that Iraqi forces there may eventually collapse and withdraw. Local Iraqi tribal leaders are calling for more U.S. support on the ground and in the air. Some leaders are even calling on the Iraqi government to arm local tribes to fight alongside Iraqi forces to support the offensive. Japan plans to give even more money to fight ISIL. The country will pledge $15 million more in addition to the $200 million already pledged to help support combat missions. The country's pledges come after 2 Japanese journalists were executed while being held hostage by ISIL. And a German former rapper has landed on the U.S. global terrorism list over his connection to ISIL. Dennis Cuthbert, also known as Deso Dog, is now known as a specially designated global terrorist. The U.S. State Department says the 39-year-old Cuthbert, born to Ghanaian and German parents, now uses the name Abu Talha al-Amani. The State Department says that he has appeared in several ISIL videos recruiting for the group. He's also pledged an oath of loyalty to ISIL and appears to serve as an ISIL recruiter. Cuthbert is emblematic of the type of foreign recruit ISIL seeks for its ranks. He's been a willing pitchman for ISIL atrocities. Cuthbert is also wanted by the German government. Well, to Ukraine now, where there is some cautious optimism during this first day of a ceasefire, but many on both sides wonder just how long it will last. Nathan Frandino has this update.
A new day arrives in eastern Ukraine. At a checkpoint outside rebel-held Donetsk, residents rejoice hours after a new ceasefire begins.
In general, I feel relief after the ceasefire, finally. But so far, I do not know what will happen next.
Guns fell abruptly silent at midnight, though pro-Russian rebels aren't holding their breath.
Ceasefire? I doubt it. Maybe 2-3 days and they will start shooting again. This is all for show.
Ukrainian troops are not hopeful either. These troops stationed near Debaltseve say rebels still have their sights set on the strategic city.
We don't shoot. Can you hear it? But there are some individual explosions from the other side. They keep shelling with some intervals into somewhere close to here.
A pro-Russian rebel had already told Reuters that the truce would not apply to the city, where Ukraine's army has been encircled. Volleys of artillery were still being heard in the area in the morning, giving many reason to believe the ceasefire won't last long.
Well, Germany is getting involved in the ceasefire in Ukraine. The country's foreign minister telling Ukraine that pro-separatist rebels and leaders in Moscow that there will be, quote, a high price if the ceasefire is indeed broken. The German foreign minister did not say what actions would be taken, but said that breaking the ceasefire would threaten the entire rest of Europe, not just the immediate region. The foreign minister says Germany is aiming to defend freedom and wants to preserve it. Roughly 5,300 people are believed to have been killed in the Ukrainian conflict thus far. Well, to Denmark now, where a manhunt is over and the suspect is dead. Police say a 22-year-old Danish man is responsible for the 2 deadly attacks in Copenhagen yesterday. He has been identified as Omar Al-Hussein. He was killed during a shootout with police earlier today. The carnage began Saturday afternoon during a free speech event at a cafe. The suspect opened fire on the meeting. One man attending was killed. It's believed Swedish cartoonist Lars Vilks was targeted in the attack. He's been on Al-Qaeda's dead or alive list for his drawings of the Prophet Muhammad. Well, the gunman then fled and later attacked a synagogue. There, a security guard was killed. The Danish Prime Minister offering her condolences to the Jewish community who are fearful of becoming targets.
Stand here in front of the Jewish synagogue in Copenhagen. We are devastated today. A man has lost his life in a service of that synagogue, and we are devastated. Our thoughts goes to his family. We are with them today, but our thoughts goes to the whole of the Jewish community today. They belong in Denmark. They are a strong part of our community, and we will do everything we can to protect the Jewish community in our country.
Well, 5 police officers were injured in the attacks. The Prime Minister says all of the country's police force was called into action during the search. The attacks are being compared to the killing rampage on the French satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo a few weeks ago. 11 people at the magazine were shot and killed for their cartoon drawings of Muhammad. Another 6 were killed in separate attacks, which happened in the days following, including an attack on a kosher supermarket. France is offering its support to Denmark. Its foreign minister visiting the scenes of the attacks, while French President François Hollande says that he will visit Denmark as soon as possible. Well, still to come, the U.S. is set to withdraw some military aid against Ebola. You're watching Arise News Weekend.
The best way to predict the future is to create it. There's a special breed of achievers out there that are called tomorrow's people, the highly creative ones who live in the future. They imagine what will be and strive to make it happen. They're bold. They refuse to wait for the future. Tomorrow bends and conforms to their ideas. At Access Bank, we share the same sentiments. We've been able to grow our bank to become a leading player in Nigeria with a strong presence across the continent, adopting best practice in everything we do. Our mantra for success is simple: speed, service, and security. Those who shape tomorrow strive for and demand perfection. At Access Bank, our service culture of speedy response and drive for excellence is the blueprint for creating customer experiences that will echo for generations. Come, let's work together and take tomorrow.
I believe that people are watching news less today, definitely. I think that more so people are going online to catch their news.
We've numbed the human mind to murders and all these bad things.
The content is a constant loop of the same stuff. So there needs to be, new content all the time.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Welcome back. In health news, in Sierra Leone, 5 new Ebola cases have been confirmed in the capital city of Freetown. In response, the government has imposed a quarantine in a fishing district of the city. Meanwhile, President Obama says that he'll bring back nearly all the troops sent to West Africa to fight against the Ebola outbreak by April 30th. A total of 1,300 U.S. troops have been deployed to that region. Well, part of telling the story about Ebola is documenting just how the disease has affected communities in the first place. Here to talk with us more on U.S. involvement in the fight against Ebola is filmmaker Matthew Kahn, who directed the feature documentary Our Tall Man, Manute Bol and the War of Visions. First of all, talk to me about your work in Sudan with genocide victims and your documentary. Talk to me about that.
Well, Manute Bol is a very famous NBA player. He was the second African NBA player, and I filmed him building a school in his village. But it wasn't a normal school. It was meant to promote reconciliation between Christians and Muslims on the ground in an area where there's a lot of conflict. And we're in completion level for that film now. Pretty soon we'll probably have a Kickstarter, and I've been to Sudan 9 times. And I got really involved on all levels, from the ground, where you have a very small NGO working, to the UN, where I was filming before independence and filming the diplomats doing their activities.
So what did you see? What did you witness with the genocide there, and what were you able to uncover?
It's no surprise that everybody in Sudan is slightly traumatized by their experience, because they've all had friends and they've all had enemies who were once friends. And to make something like that into a peaceful settlement is very difficult. And now with the new civil war, it's doubly true, because even the leadership of the government and the rebels, who were once on the same side, are now separated. So a lot of people's hopes and dreams are shattered, and in a kind of strange, ambiguous state. Even though there's a new peace treaty, it could be broken next week and no one knows what's going to happen.
A lot of countries, of course, suffering with internal conflicts and civil conflicts there, but also there is a major health crisis in Africa that is perhaps beginning to wane now, the Ebola crisis. And you spoke with a lot of other folks who were filmmakers and cameramen who were sort of witnessing what was happening there. The U.S. troops are beginning to pull out. Talk to me about your experiences talking to those folks about what they were documenting.
Well, their experience is like a horror movie. It's the fear of death, because they're taken from their normal environment and placed into somewhere where anything you can touch can kill you. And as Americans, we were watching this from far away, and their work brought that into our living room. So we got to experience what they experienced to some extent.
What do you think is the power of film in terms of telling that story? Because clearly we did see the devastation, families just ripped apart, bodies lying in the street. It's terrible.
Right, and it should be, horror-inducing. Ebola's been around since 1976, and every outbreak has been a little bit larger, but usually contained and small, and seems like it's far away. And suddenly, with our international culture and quick flights, we were facing the idea that this could be happening in Texas.
So are you trying to tell us, perhaps then, as a filmmaker, an artist, that the power of documenting these kinds of events, whether it be genocide, whether it be Ebola, is critical to our international understanding of crises that deserve our attention?
Of course. Film is bigger than language in a way, like than spoken language or written words. So there are things that you can share with people using film that you could never do just in normal translations of writing.
And some of those examples would be?
Well, a good example is the 60 Minutes piece that many, many people saw, which featured, for example, the Dr. Stephen Hatch, who had personal relationships with African doctors before the Ebola crisis broke out. But as an infectious disease physician, he knew that when this crisis broke out, he wanted to volunteer. And going to the area after his friends had died really was able, he wrote about that in the Times, but his story was shown on 60 Minutes. So those are kind of very interesting ways of translating this to a large American population that needs to know that not every intervention needs to be a military one. It can be a humanitarian intervention like we just saw, which I think was very successful. We don't know really if the Ebola outbreak is truly waning, or if this is like a lull before another storm. But what we've done is train a whole host of African medical practitioners to deal with the next outbreak when it happens.
So now we're more prepared. Filmmaker Matthew Kahn, thank you so much for joining us with these insights on Arise News Weekend.
Thank you.
When we come back, a new profit investment in America's future. You're watching Arise News Weekend.
If I was building my own network, it would be for the people, by the people. It would be very diverse. It would be with every culture you can think of.
If I was to start my own news network, it would reflect positive and negative within the continents and the countries around the world.
I think that I would be more looking towards young people.
If I were to build my own news network, it would look like New York City. Old, young, fresh, hip, classic,
If I was to build my own news network, I would just have people from all over who are very connected and diverse.
If I was to build my own news network, my own world network, I would love a correspondent in every country, every location, every city. I mean, it's kind of unrealistic, but how cool would it be to get local stories from the impoverished country, the impoverished city that we don't know about?
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
I have never worked for a news organization like Arise News. The vision here is not just to tell the main stories of the day, but to tell the news that other organizations don't tell, and tell it in a way that people that look like me, that look like you, are interested in. In this news organization, everybody's opinion counts. There is no big I's and little U's. Every angle, every perspective matters, and that's freeing in so many ways.
New Profit is a fund that you can invest in that invests in others, specifically some of the challenges facing America in education, in workforce development, in public health, and poverty. Here to talk about some of their educational initiatives is Shruti Sarah. She is a partner with New Profit. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Francesca.
Well, according to New Profit, what do you think is really wrong with the current public education model in American schools, and why is there such a need to reimagine how children learn?
Thanks for asking that question. We have a lot of belief in a lot of the advancements going on in the current education system in America, and yet we know from the advances in learning science and the advances in neuroscience that just because kids are in the same classroom, it doesn't mean that they share the same mind. So we need to switch to a learning environment that doesn't teach the average student, but actually understands each individual student's personalized needs and talents, and finds ways to maximize their talents and serve and support their needs in the best way possible.
So not every kid learns the same way, basically, and so you can't just teach the test, you have to teach to the child. What kind of data, though, do you have to support your claims?
Well, you know, it's interesting because while only 5 to 6% of students are diagnosed with specific learning disabilities in America, we know that 20% of students have learning and attention issues, issues where their needs are so specific that they cannot be taught by effectively by the current classroom environment. In addition to that, we're looking at numbers around what students are experiencing in life. There was a recent Gallup poll in 2014 that showed more than 50% of students lack hope for the future. So we know that there's something that isn't happening in the learning environment to support them to achieve their maximum potential.
Well, you know, we're talking about American students and New Profit focusing on the United States, and we know that the new initiative, Reimagine Learning, is also something that you're working on as part of New Profit to do just that. How do these things work? How do you partner with schools to make things happen for kids?
That's a great question. So we work with schools and communities, as well as with social entrepreneurs and researchers, to invest. And when we say invest, we provide money and resources, strategic support and whatnot, to help these innovations scale so that we can get what teachers need in their hands, and we can support students to take and advocate for their needs, as well as supporting parents to understand their students better, their young people in their houses better, so that they can support those students' journeys.
How do you get your funding, Shruti? We know that people have a lot of options as to where they're going to give their money. What's specific about New Profit that's so important? You've called it sort of an aggregator, if you will, for giving.
So we get our funding from a combination of high net worth individuals and foundations who are looking to create the kind of social change that we care about. A lot of the high net worth individuals that invest in New Profit, and what I mean by that is by giving donations to New Profit, they are people who understand the notion of giving your money to somebody who understands a space. So they would do the same thing with their for-profit dollars as they do with their nonprofit or philanthropic spending. And the foundations that invest in New Prophet are looking to create movements and create bigger change than what they've been able to do on their own, or in sometimes complementary to the work that they're doing on their own.
All right, Shruti, we're going to have to leave it there, but certainly we appreciate your time, and hopefully a lot of kids will benefit from all the work that you do.
Thank you. I appreciate the time with you as well.
Thanks for joining us. Well, still ahead, a new generation of African poets. You're watching Arise News Weekend.
I don't think that television news in the United States reflects the diversity of the world. I don't think it does a great job of even reflecting the diversity of the United States.
When you are watching TV, you don't really see a lot of different cultures. There are plenty of other places that people might not even know about.
We are living in a global culture, and you cannot hide news that is happening when there's so much social media.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
One of the great things about Arise Entertainment 360 is we have this Arise to Your Health segment, which really focuses on the holistic approach of being healthy. So we do everything from working out to juicing to getting in shape by doing fun exercises like bouncing on a trampoline or wearing these bouncy boots on our feet when we're jumping all over the set. We've done karate, we've danced the weight off, we've done just about everything. And of course, I love when we eat on set, but we do it in a very healthy and clean way.
Welcome back. Well, Poet Laureate Rita Dove once said that poetry is language at its most distilled and most powerful. And not long ago, I had this chance to chat with some African poets about the up-and-comers in the powerful language of poetry. Well, famed poet Pablo Neruda said poetry is an act of peace, while Rumi said poetry can be dangerous, especially beautiful poetry, because it gives the illusion of having had the experience without actually going through it. Margot Stever is the founder of the Hudson Valley Writers Center and the Slapping Hall Press, and she's worked with Jennifer Franklin on publishing their second box set of 7 new generation African poets, and that is what we have here today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I want to begin by reading a little portion of this chapbook here, Our Men Do Not Belong to Us, by the poet Warshan Shire, and she is actually a poet who is Kenyan-born Somali, and this is called What We Own. Our men do not belong to us. Even my own father, left one afternoon, is not mine. My brother is in prison, is not mine. My uncles, they go back home, and they are shot in the head, are not mine. My cousin, stabbed in the street for being too or not enough, are not mine. Then the men we try to love say we carry too much loss, we're too much black, are too heavy to be around, much too sad to love. Then they leave, and we mourn them too. And it goes on. But what really, that drew tears to my eyes as I was reading it. And it just sort of was encapsulating the fact that this woman was really feeling so many things. So what drew you to publish these new generations of African poets?
This publication was actually called the African Poetry Book Fund, APBF, and it's a collaboration between the Slapping Hall Press, Prairie Schooner, the University of Nebraska, and the Poetry Foundation. And the series editors, Chris Abani and Kwame Dawes, actually chose the 7 new African poets. And they had started a book prize, the Sillerman Book Prize, and from that they found several of the poetry manuscripts. And then they looked through all sorts of other venues, including talking to arts directors all over the world to find the other 4, to find all 7 of the collections.
Well, Jennifer, what do you think about their work collectively, although there are a bunch of poets here, that is progressive?
Well, there's a lot that's progressive about this collection. It's so diverse. It's obviously the continent of Africa is so extensive, and so it's hard to say what is African poetry. But these poets talk about issues that are very important to people living in Africa. There are issues that, as Americans, we don't face on a daily basis, like in Worcestershire, female genital mutilation. And another wonderful poet in this collection, Nick Makoa, talks about the vicissitudes of being a child soldier. These are all issues that we really wanted to bring.
in being a child soldier, but talking about it in a way that is lyric and poetic and, you know, perhaps in a language and a way of conveying some kind of meaning to these issues that otherwise are often somewhat forgotten. So what is it about Africa and African poets that is so unifying while remaining so diverse?
Well, Africa is such a huge continent, and so obviously the poetry of Africa is extraordinarily diverse, but it's also unified by the depth of their understanding of what is happening in Africa today, much of which entails enduring the aftermath of colonialism, the devastation of the natural landscape, the brutality of one group against another because of religious or tribal differences, and violence propelled by human greed against people and animals.
And why do you think then that these are all sort of what we might call social issues? Why are they so present in poetry? Why is poetry so essential for our everyday lives?
Well, poetry is so essential because it's news that stays news, as Ezra Pound said. And the two editors, Kwame Dawes and Chris Abani, really wanted to publish these. What's different about this is it's published by editors who are from Africa. In America, most editors are Americans, and they are the ones who are determining what African students are reading. But what's different about Ilya Kaminsky's Poets in the World series is that they are published by people from those editors from those specific countries.
And where do you think the dialogue needs to go from here? Obviously, we're getting the word out about this collection, which is great. And what other kinds of opportunities will people have to learn more about these poets and these poems?
Well, already I think
4 out of 7.
4 out of 7 of the chapbook poets have had full-length collections published. And what's really wonderfully unique about this project is that many African poets are not able to have their work published. And so this is just really a beginning of opportunity.
And why is that?
That is, you know, that is a really good question.
Lots of obstacles, but you have the opportunity to do that here, and that's what you're trying to do with these different chapbooks.
And I think, though, that there's also not enough opportunity in our own country, actually, and that the mission of our press is to publish poets who haven't been published before, but actually there are not very many opportunities even in this country because...
For emerging poets.
For emerging poets, yeah. It is definitely not easy. As an author and a poet myself, I definitely know. This is 7 new generation African poets: TJ Dema, Clifton Gachua, Tsitsi Jaji, Nick Makoha, Laden Osman, Worcestershire, and Len Verheuye. Forgive me if I've massacred any of those names, but you can pick this up with the Hudson Valley Press and
It's called Slapping Hall Press. If they wanted to get them, they could look at our website, which is www.writerscenter.org. And also, if they wanted to see some examples, they could go to the Poetry Foundation website.
The abridged electronic version is on Poetry Foundation's website at www.poetryfoundation.org.
All right, Jennifer and Margot, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us on Arise News Weekend.
Thank you so much.
We appreciate your time. And you're watching Arise News Weekend.
There's certain news programs that have a Democrat and a Republican, and all they do is, here's the Democrat saying his side and the Republican say, you know, it's a little debate show, but not everybody is a sort of an extremist on one side or the other. People are in the middle a lot more.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Well, Mercedes-Benz Fashion Week is underway in New York City, and while Kanye West may have made headlines for his fashion show with Adidas for all the wrong reasons, like making guests like Beyonce and Anna Wintour waiting 45 minutes in the cold for it to start, supermodel Naomi Campbell made headlines last night for all the right ones. You're looking at video of her fashion show that she did last night. This, of course, is for a fundraiser for Ebola. It's called Fashion for Relief, and all the funds proceeds go to care.org. Some of the folks that were there included actress Rosario Dawson, P. Diddy's son was there, Tyson Beckford. We have boxers, we have actors and actresses, and we're going to leave you with this video of this Fashion Week show with our exclusive video. Thanks for joining us. I'm Francesca Maxime.